క్వశ్చన్స్ ఎవరికి ఎక్కడ కనిపిస్తాయి మనకు?
చాట్ బాక్స్ ఉంటుంది సార్,
చాట్ చూడాలా?
వాళ్ళు ఏమని చెప్తూ ఆ క్వశ్చన్స్ వేస్తారు.
ఓకే ఓకే,
లాస్ట్లో
సరిపోతుంది. Good morning, guys. Today's topic is vitamins. I'll briefly go through vitamins. There's nothing much to explain here. These vitamins, it's most of facts and then numbers, RDA treatment. It's most of the number. Now, yes, vitamins. Vitamins are organic compounds. Vita means life. These vitamins are very important for life, for sustaining life. These are required in very small amounts. These are generally not synthesized in the body. So these are obtained throughout diet. These are vitamins are normally present in very low amount in the food also, but that low amount is enough for us. These vitamins can be classified into fat soluble and water soluble vitamins. General functions of vitamins. Vitamins are very essential to the body, just to prevent, to maintain the health, help prevent deficiencies like beriberi, rickets, pellagra, all that, to regulate the repair of the body cells, to help combat aging process, that is oxidation process, to prevent the aging process of the body, and to help the process of carbohydrates and release of energy in the body through coenzymes and all that. Like these, most of these vitamins act as coenzymes, and they're helpful in breaking, processing the carbohydrates and releasing energy from them. And then vitamins, as I said, that broadly divided into two things: fat soluble and water soluble. Fat soluble vitamins are A, D, E, K. Vitamin A, D, and vitamin E and vitamin K. And water soluble are vitamin B complex vitamins and vitamin C. Broadly, if you compare between fat soluble and water soluble vitamins, the major difference between these two are solubility. First, fat soluble, obviously they're fat soluble, and water soluble, they're soluble in water. Absorption. These fat soluble vitamins, they require bile and pancreatic juice for absorption from the intestine. The water soluble vitamins, they don't need any enzymes, they just simply get absorbed in the intestine directly into the intestine. The transportation. These, once they're absorbed into the intestine, from the intestine to the organ, generally all these fat soluble vitamins are transported to liver from intestine through lymph, and they need a carrier protein to bind. These vitamins which are absorbed in the intestine, they are bound to a carrier protein and transferred to liver. These water soluble vitamins, they freely travel in the body. They don't need any carrier proteins except vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is an exception in water soluble vitamins. Storage. Generally, all these fat soluble vitamins, only once they're absorbed from intestine, they're carried to liver. In liver, they're stored, and also few vitamins, fat soluble vitamins, they're stored in adipose tissue, fatty tissues. And water soluble vitamins, they're usually not stored anywhere. They're just absorbed, and like how much our body requires, it uses, and remaining is excreted in urine. Surplus is excreted in urine, except vitamin B12. Only vitamin B12 is stored in the body. And then excretion, this what I told, like the surplus vitamins that stored in liver or fatty tissue, all those fat soluble vitamins. Whereas water soluble vitamins, they are removed in kidney through urine. And fat soluble vitamins, as they're stored in the body, they can cause hypervitaminosis. Whereas water soluble vitamins, they don't cause any hypervitaminosis. All the excess will be excreted through urine. And deficiencies. As fat soluble vitamins are stored in the body, their deficiencies usually won't present immediately, because the body will have stores which is enough for a few weeks to months. So during that period, if you're not giving those vitamins, also fat soluble vitamins, also patient can tolerate, like people can tolerate. Whereas water soluble vitamins, they are not stored in the body. They should be given regularly, daily, or like every 1-2 days you should be giving this water soluble vitamins. Now coming to what is fat soluble vitamins. As I told you, vitamin A, D, E, K. First, starting with vitamin A. Vitamin A, we call it as retinol. Generally, vitamin A, it is obtained from plant pigments. We call them as carotenoids. Usually, this is also known as provitamin A. These are, once they're absorbed from the intestine, they're stored in the liver in form of retinol palmitate. And retinol palmitate, whenever it is required, this whatever carotenoids or provitamin A directly converted into retinol and retinoic acid, and these are the active forms of vitamin A, which actually play the role of actual function of vitamin A. These are absorbed through chylomicrons. What happens in the intestine, when they absorb fats are absorbed through in form of chylomicrons, and this vitamin A is incorporated into chylomicrons and transported to liver, where it is stored and then converted into active forms of vitamin A. Main functions of vitamin A is vision, especially night vision, where retinol and those conversions are very important. Next slide will show you how it helps in vision. And then mucosal membrane lining. The integrity of the mucosal membrane is maintained by vitamin A, especially respiratory mucosa and gastrointestinal mucosa. Integrity is maintained by vitamin A. In vision, what happens is in rods, this is retinol. Retinol is nothing but an isomer of retinol. It is retinol. It combines with opsin, the protein which is already there in rods. They form rhodopsin. Whenever we see light, the rhodopsin is broken into opsin and all trans retinal. During the process of breaking, when rhodopsin is breaking into opsin and all trans retina, there is an electric charge produced, which is transmitted through optic nerve to brain from eye. So this is how like the vitamin A is important in night vision, especially we say dark adaptation. Source of vitamin A. Common source of vitamin A are green leafy vegetables, and then fresh fruits like oranges, carrots. Recommended daily doses. In infants, it is 300 to 400 micrograms per day. In children, it goes up to 400 to 600 micrograms. In adolescents, it is required up to 750 micrograms. Generally, 1 microgram of retinol gives 3.3 international units of vitamin A. So 30 milligrams gives 1 lakh international units. This conversion is important because 1 lakh international units is standard. Like mostly, we'll give multipliers like 1 lakh or 2 lakh international units while therapy. So that's what 30 mg is 1 lakh. Deficiencies. What vitamin A deficiency causes? Mostly vitamin A deficiency initial in mild forms of vitamin A, there will be only skin manifestations like follicular hyperkeratosis of skin, where the skin becomes rough with hyperkeratotic patches, like a goosebumpy skin. Like if you get goosebumps, they continue to stay away, how it will be like that. And next, eye defects. Eye defects is first initially eye defects will be as presents as dark adaptation. Dark adaptation is when you go from a lighting area to a dark room. So initially you need the dark adaptation. Like it takes time for you to adapt to that area, and then this night vision, a kind of night vision in the dark, you will be able to see. That is dark adaptation. See, that is hampered initially. Then lately they can present as night blindness. In between there are like xerophthalmia. Xerophthalmia is dry eye, and Bitot spots. I show you in the next picture Bitot spots. And keratomalacia. Keratomalacia is like dryness of cornea. And then next manifestation is mucosal. I told you like this vitamin A is important in mucosal integrity of respiratory system and gastrointestinal system, and helps in immunity also, in the local immunity. So when this mucosa is impaired, there will be severe chance of severe systemic infections. The mucosa is breached, the infection can easily enter into the body and can cause severe systemic infections. This is a Bitot spots. This is white patch like foamy thing. You can see the eye that were Bittert spots. And here the first image, top left, you can see Bittert spots, and top right, you can see the corneal drying along with an ulcer, the stain with the fluorescent dye. And bottom right, we can see corneal scarring. That white thing is scarring. And bottom left, we can see ulcer, corneal ulcer. Vitamin A deficiency can cause all this. This is the WHO classification for xerophthalmia. Initially, the initial manifestation I told you, darker, difficulty in darker patient, then they present with night blindness. Then that is XN. X1A is conjunctival cirrhosis. Only conjunctiva is affected. Cornea is spared in X1A. X1B, there will be development of Bittert spots. X2 is corneal cirrhosis. X3A is corneal ulceration starts or keratomalacia, where less than 1/3 of corneal surface is affected. X3B is corneal ulceration and keratomalacia, more than 1/3 of corneal surface is affected. XS is corneal scarring. Once ulcer heals, it forms as a scar. So the difficulty in scar formation is like once scar is formed, the cornea is like there is of no use. Like we can't see through the scar. The vision is impaired of the corneal scar formation. And XF is xerophthalmic fundus. After scarring also, then there will be fundus changes also. All these are stages. WHO classification of night blindness, like xerophthalmia. Then treatment depends upon the age. The child is less than 6 months, we need to give 50,000 international units. 6 to 12 months, we'll give 1 lakh international units. More than 1 year, we give 2 lakh international units. There are actually 3 doses we'll give on day 1, day 2, and after 4 weeks we'll repeat one more. Same, depending on the age, we'll give 3 doses. Sometimes, like when the child is unable to tolerate vitamin A orally, when the child is unable to take, like due to vomiting or any malabsorption syndrome, then we need to give parenterally. Parenterally, generally we give for children more than 6 months, we'll give half of the what we give orally. Orally, if we give 1 lakh international units, we'll give 50,000 international units in those children who are above 6 months. If child is less than 6 months, then we have to give 75% of the normal oral dose. Mostly young children, less than 5 years, now they're telling of less than 3 years, are more prone for vitamin A deficiency. So they need supplementation of vitamin A. The national vitamin A program, in national immunization schedule, they included vitamin A doses at 9 months and at again 15 to 18 months. When you give 9 months with MMR, we give 1 lakh international units. If the child is less than 12 months, we give 1 lakh international units. After more than 1 year, that is 15 to 18 months, we'll give 2 lakh international units with the DPT booster. In endemic areas where there are a lot of cases of vitamin A reporting, we give 3 doses, at 3 extra doses at 24 weeks, at 24 months, 30 months, 36 months. Generally, children presenting with measles or severe malnutrition, they also should receive vitamin A doses depending on the age. Depending on the age of the child, we give vitamin A in case of measles or severe malnutrition. One thing to remember is vitamin A deficiency is the most common cause for childhood blindness. Then hypervitaminosis and teratogenicity. As I told you, all fat-soluble vitamins are stored in the liver or adipose tissue, and they can cause toxicity when there is too much. That's what happens when the child normally regularly vitamin A toxic we don't see unless it is taken like so if someone is taking regular fish liver oil, or some adolescent is getting treatment for acne in form of isotretinoic acid, is a form of vitamin A, we know. If they keep taking everyday doses, then they may present with toxicity. That is generally more than 50,000 international units per day of vitamin A. That is for several months of the day. Then they manifest as hypervitaminosis. The manifestations can be acute manifestations and chronic manifestations. Acute manifestations are due to pseudotumor cerebri. That is like benign hypertension in the brain, like the intracranial pressure is increased, but there is no tumor or anything. It is just increased because of vitamin A toxicity. They present with vomiting, irritability. If it's young children, they are present with bulging of frontal eye. They can have vision problems like diplopia and headache. These are the acute manifestations. In chronic, these people, they don't have like fluid tumor cerebri symptoms, but they have different things: anorexia, dry skin, alopecia, painful joints, and hyposplenomegaly. They can present with all this in chronic manifestation. The child is getting like, chronically is getting vitamin, is being to exposed to vitamin A toxicity. Vitamin A can cause teratogen, can cause teratogenicity also. If it is taken more than 3,000 micrograms daily or 7,500 micrograms weekly in early gestation, this is according to WHO. With mother, like in early gestation and pregnancy, during the early pregnancy times, the mother is getting daily doses of 300 micrograms, or like weekly she is taking 7,500 micrograms weekly, then that leads to teratogenicity. Then comes vitamin D. Vitamin D is known as sunshine vitamin. Actually, it is produced in the upper layers of the skin on exposure to solar UVB radiation. And normal conditions, whatever endogenous or whatever our body produces, that is sufficient for the body needs. But in few conditions where the body is unable to produce this vitamin D, like complete covering of body, or like when not exposed to sun, or few any skin problems, there won't be this endogenous production of vitamin D is hampered, and that can cause deficiency. Normal metabolism. What happens in the skin? In the skin, we have dehydrocholesterol. When it is exposed to sun, it converts into vitamin D. And dietary also, there are two forms, D2 and D3. From diet also, the vitamin D can come either from skin or dietary. In liver, whatever this vitamin D we take, it goes to liver. There, with the help of 25-hydroxylase enzyme, it is converted into 25-hydroxy vitamin D. This is the most prevalent form of vitamin D in body. Generally, if you want to find out vitamin D deficiency also, we calculate 25-hydroxy vitamin D in the body. And from 25-hydroxy vitamin D, it is again converted in kidney with 1-alpha-hydroxylase to form 1,25-dihydroxy vitamin D. This is the most active form. This vitamin D helps in like it has role in 3 places in the body, where especially intestine. In intestine, it increases the calcium and phosphate absorption from diet. Whatever dietary calcium and phosphate we are taking, it helps in the absorption in intestine. And when it comes to kidney, whatever kidney filtrated water, calcium and phosphate are filtered into the tubules, renal tubules, it is reabsorbed with the help of vitamin D. And in bone mineralization, helps in bone mineralization. Actually, what deposition of calcium and phosphate in the bone happens with vitamin D. Actually, there is calcium homeostasis happening, mainly depending on vitamin D and PTH. This calcium homeostasis you will read in, we'll just know in next class in crickets in next class, that time we know. Generally, vitamin D functions. Told you mostly, main thing is growth and bone mineralization. Vitamin D functions, and it has got immune function also. Now it is implicated in a lot of things. Vitamin D in autoimmune diseases, in infections like tuberculosis, even COVID also it is implicated. Vitamin D. So a lot of immunological functions it has got, and regulation of muscle calcium transport. Like normal for muscle contraction also we need calcium. The transport is maintained by vitamin D. It helps in apoptosis and cell differentiation, a lot of other things. But the main thing is growth and bone mineralization and the regulation of immunity. These two are the main things. And sources. Most common source of vitamin D are eggs, meat, and mushrooms, and to some extent milk and milk products, cheese and milk. Generally fortified, like in few countries, milk is fortified with vitamin D. So that way they give like we fortify salt with iodine. Then few countries milk is fortified with vitamin D. Normal are the daily recommended allowances. 10 micrograms or 400 international units in infants, and in children it is up to 600 international units. Children more than 1 year. If it is less than 1 year, it is 400 international units. Someone more than 1 year, it is 600 international units. Vitamin D is very like breast milk is very poor in vitamin D. Generally, it is 30 to 40 international units per liter. Per liter means like infants won't be able to take 1 liter. Mother won't produce 1 liter of milk per day. So whatever the baby is getting is very less. So all infants, irrespective of the gestational age, we give supplementation of vitamin D in them. There are around 400 international units per day we'll give. Then I told you vitamin D deficiency. How will measure? By measuring 25 hydroxy vitamin D levels in the body, we'll measure, like we'll find out, like come to know whether it is deficient or not. If it is less than 10 nanograms per ml, it is deficient. 10 to 20 is insufficient. Optimal is 20 to 60. High is 60 to 90, and toxicity is more than 90 nanograms per ml. Treatment. Once they used to follow Strauss regimen, where they used to give 6,000 international units weekly, 6 weeks and all that. Now that high dose of those things were not followed. We give daily low doses. Daily doses of depends upon the age. If child is less than 1 month, 1 year, we give 2,000 international units daily for 12 weeks. Every day for 12 weeks we give. And it is 1 to 12 years, we'll give 3,000 to 6,000 international units. For children more than 12 years, we give 6,000 international units per day. We give like this for 12 weeks, and then followed by maintenance. Maintenance will give low dose like 400 to 600 international units per day. This is the treatment of vitamin D deficiency. Actually, vitamin D deficiency main thing is rickets, causes rickets. Rickets is a separate class. You will be dealt in a separate thing. And hypervitaminosis D. When you see this thing, you know, toxicity is more than 90. I told you. Generally, hypervitaminosis we call. If it is more than 100 nanograms per ml, we call it as hypervitaminosis D. It can result in hypercalcemia and calciuria, which can predispose for renal stones, and they can have also other manifestations like anorexia, vomiting, hypertension, renal insufficiency, and failure to thrive. Then coming to vitamin E. Vitamin E is one of the important antioxidant in the body. Generally, vitamin E belongs to a group of compounds called as tocopherol. It generally prevents PUFAs, like polyunsaturated fatty acids, from getting oxidized by oxygen-free radicals. That's what the function of vitamin E basically. It is vitamin E again, like as I told you, it's a fat-soluble vitamin. It is absorbed through small intestine, especially in presence of bile and pancreatic juices, where this vitamin E is incorporated into chylomicrons and transported to liver through lymphatics, where it can be stored. From liver, it is secreted with LDL, low density lipoprotein. It is bound to low density lipoprotein and then secreted into the blood. Normal RDF vitamin E is very less. This is 0.4 micrograms per kg per body weight per day in infants. In premature infants, the requirement of vitamin E is high, the 15 to 20 micrograms per day. In children, it is 3 to 6 mg. Rich source of vitamin E are generally oils, sunflower oil, olive oil, or cottonseed oil. All these things, oils are most common sources of vitamin E, and nuts also, nuts and green vegetables also. Next level of source for vitamin E. Vitamin E main deficiency features are: it can present as visual problems, muscle weakness, muscle pain, difficulty in coordination and walking. Vitamin E can cause all these things. As it can affect brain cells, that causes all this damage. It can cause damage to vitamin brain cells, and the high chances of heart disease also. Vitamin D is it's an antioxidant. It prevents plaque formation, clot formation in arteries. So when vitamin E is deficient, there is high chances of forming of plaques and clots in the arteries, and the high risk for heart diseases. and it can affect fertility also. It has effect on the sperms, so it can affect fertility. And one of the different features in infants is vitamin A can be like in especially preterm infants, vitamin A can be very low, and it can present as hemolysis in newborn. So one of the common like hemolysis in newborn, one important thing is differential diagnosis you have to keep is vitamin D deficiency. Treatment of vitamin D deficiency. Generally, vitamin D deficiency we don't see in normal children, except they are associated with some symptom like short bowel syndrome or any malabsorption. Then only we'll see vitamin D deficiency. But otherwise, in children, we don't see much of vitamin D deficiency. Then, if it is a malabsorption or something, generally they respond to oral doses. They don't need parenteral doses. Generally, we do oral doses, high doses of oral vitamin E, around 15 to 20 mg per kg per day. We give at that dose of vitamin E. And hypervitaminosis E, again, vitamin E is stored, fat soluble, it is stored in adipose tissue and liver, so it can cause toxicity when it's too much. But usually we don't see toxicity. Even if someone is taking 800 mg per day for months to years, also generally we don't see hypervitaminosis. They generally say if it is ingested more than 800 to 3200 mg per day, then only the features of hypervitaminosis comes, like muscle weakness, fatigue, nausea, and diarrhea can be seen. And sometimes at this high doses can antagonize the action of vitamin K. Vitamin K is a very important coagulation. So when antagonize the action of vitamin K, it can lead to bleeding. The next fat soluble vitamin is vitamin K. Vitamin K, it has two forms, vitamin K1 and K2. K1 is a plant-based, K2 is animal-based. Actually, K1 we get it from plants, Phyloquinone, and K2 is menaquinone. Generally, it is synthesized by our intestinal bacteria. It is absorbed in the jejunum with the help of again bile and pancreatic juices, incorporated into chylum macrons and delivered to liver through lymph. All these fat solubles, the same mechanism of absorption. And 80% of the pool of vitamin K is in liver. Whatever we have vitamin K in the body, 80% will be in the liver. Functions. Most important function of vitamin K is coagulation. It acts in the coagulation of blood. First thing is it acts as a cofactor for carboxylation of glutamic acid. And next, factors 7, 9, and 10 are vitamin K dependent factors. Actually, these factors, what are 2, 7, 9, 10, these facilitate chylation of calcium ion to glutamate and platelet phosphatase, which is essential for coagulation cascade operation. Like vitamin K, all this factor 2, 7, 9, 10, these play an important role in coagulation cascade. Normal nutritional requirement. Most commonly we take like whatever diet we take, it can have vitamin K, and some microorganisms, bacteria, gut bacteria also synthesize vitamin K. Those two together are enough of normal nutrition, like normal vitamin K deficiency. We don't need any extra supplementation of vitamin K. But if at all, if there is some problem, they can like normal RDA for a newborn is 3 to 5 micrograms per day, and in up to at 2 years it is 10 micrograms per day. In older children, it can be extended up to 10 to 30 micrograms per day. The main problem of vitamin K comes in newborns. Especially in newborns, what happens is, especially in preterm, vitamin K won't cross placenta. So whatever mother has vitamin K, it won't be transmitted to newborn. And then these newborns won't have adequate intestinal flora. Intestinal microorganisms won't be there, so they won't be producing vitamin K. And breast milk also very poor source of vitamin K. So all these put together, this leads to a vitamin K deficient in children, newborns, especially preterms, and they can present with hemorrhage. They will be bleeding from everywhere actually in this children. Vitamin K sources. Most common vitamin K sources are green leafy vegetables and liver. Vitamin K deficiency, as I told you, like these preterm newborns, especially they present with hemorrhagic disease of newborn. It is a severe bleeding manifestation with ecchymosis. Generally, it appears in the first week of life. Baby will be bleeding from everything, all orifices, orally, umbilical stump, from anal region, everywhere the baby can be bleeding. Here in these children, if you check, PT APTT is prolonged, but normal platelet prothrombin time and partial active prothrombin time is prolonged, but the platelet count in these children will be normal. So all these newborns, irrespective of the risk factor, whether it's preterm or like irrespective of preterm or term or any birth weight, we give all children vitamin K prophylaxis. We give dose of 0.5 to 1 mg IM we give to prevent this hemorrhagic disease of newborn. This is vitamin K. And now coming to water soluble vitamins. All this time we are dealing with fat soluble vitamins. Generally they are absorbed with fats. We have to remember that thing from intestine. It's water soluble vitamins that freely diffused into the intestine. From there they don't need any carriers. They carry it to whole body. First we deal with vitamin C. Vitamin C is also known as L-ascorbic acid or ascorbate. It is a most active reducing agent. Vitamin C helps in in a lot of reducing reactions happening in the body. This vitamin C plays an important role. It has a powerful antioxidant property also, vitamin C. Most of the animals synthesize their own vitamin C, but not in humans. Humans can't synthesize vitamin C. Functions. Functions is vitamin C. First important thing is collagen. Collagen is required for all connective tissues. So whatever, if you have vitamin C deficiency, main thing is wound healing will be impaired, bone formation is impaired. So normal connective tissue, like normal blood vessels, everything needs a connective tissue. So all blood vessels become fragile and all this without vitamin C. And as a reducing substance, oxidation reduction reactions, it participates in oxidation reduction reactions, especially hydroxylation of lysine and proline. And it reduces ferric to ferrous. When you take ferric sulfate or something like we give in the treatment of iron deficiency anemia, we generally ask that to take with vitamin C, like with lime juice or like whatever lemon juice or orange juice or something. So it has got high vitamin C. It converts ferric into ferrous state. Iron is converted from ferric to ferrous state, and ferrous state is absorbed well in gut. And as an antioxidant, it stabilizes vitamin E and folic acid. The source of vitamin C. Vitamin C, all all citrus fruits, all orange color fruits, or whatever, all the contain, and fresh leafy vegetables, they contain high doses of vitamin C. And in infants, it is 30 to 40 mg per day. In children, it is 40 to 70 milligrams per day, vitamin C RDA. Vitamin C deficiency can present with normal gum bleedings and swollen gums to dry and splitting hair. It can have fatigue, frequent nosebleeds, because of fragility, blood vessel fragility. They can present with frequent nosebleeds. They can have gingivitis. They can have weak immune system, easily bruising. There will be swollen joints because of hemarthrosis, and slow wound healing, dry and scaly skin, and they can present with scurvy. Scurvy is like nothing but vitamin C deficiency. Generally, these children present with tenderness of limbs because of subperiosteal bleeding. Below the periosteum, between the bone and periosteum, we can see bleeding in these children with scurvy, and they can have PTK due to increased capillary fragility, and painful joint swelling due to hemarthrosis. Child may present with inability to move limbs. We call it as pseudoparalysis. It's because of not paralysis as such, because of pain. Because of the pain, the child won't be able to move his limbs, and they assume frog-like posture with semi-flexionate hip and knee. They can have gastric angular swelling at costochondral junction. Here the sternum is depressed, and costochondral junction they can be swelling. We call it as scorbutic rosary, and then it can result in scurvy. Scurvy can result in severe cerebral hemorrhage or hemopericardium, which can be fatal. So the diagnosis of scurvy is by X-ray. X-ray manifestations. Here we see subperiosteal hemorrhage, and then this metaphysis. Calcification will be seen. The dense zone of provisional calcification we call that metaphase is calcified. We call it as white line of Frankel. And proximal to white line of Frankel, we see a rarefaction area. Like there's a less calcification there. That is known as Timberfield zone. And epiphysis. Epiphysis, we see a ring kind of line around the epiphysis. We call as Wimberger's ring. That one. And next to Timberfield zone, that is rarefaction in metaphysis. It's a triangular defect. If you see, you can point out here. Triangular defect that we call Pelkin's spur. All these are the features of scurvy. Scurvy is diagnosed by X-ray, that we have to remember. Especially knee will take, we'll see both sides, all these features of scurvy. Treatment of scurvy. Scurvy will give vitamin C orally. Most of the people tolerate orally. It's not a problem. 100 to 200 mg of vitamin C orally daily will give. Otherwise, if you want a rapid improvement, we can give parenterally also. It is equal to, we can give vitamin C supplements, and we can give normal orange juice or tomato pulp of 100 ml. It will also have equal effect as giving vitamin C orally. Next, coming to vitamin B. Vitamin B or B complex. There are many vitamins in vitamin B. See, I'll just go briefly regarding this vitamins, B complex vitamins. Actually, B1 is thiamine. This helps in mostly all these vitamin B act as cofactors in a lot of enzyme actions. They are cofactors. All vitamin B's are cofactors. Vitamin B1 is thiamine. Generally, we see vitamin B1 deficiency in people who eat like polished rice and all this are alcoholics. We see thiamine deficiency. These daily requirements, depending on the age, it's given here. Less than 6 months is 0.2 mg. 6 to 12 months is 0.3. More than 14 years, we have to remember that more than 14 years is 1.2 mg. That is the daily requirement of thiamine. Generally, thiamine deficiency, it presents as beriberi. Beriberi, I've separated that in next slide. And then next, B2 is riboflavin. Riboflavin, we see most commonly riboflavin, riboflavin is available in meat, milk, eggs, cereals, and vegetables. Normal requirement in children is 1 mg, we say. All these, most of them are around riboflavin and thiamine 1 mg RDA. We have to remember that one. And deficiency of riboflavin presents with photophobia, glossitis, cheilitis, angular stomatitis, seborrheic dermatitis, and corneal vascularization. Then B3 is niacin. Niacin is a cofactor in NAD and NADP. It is again, niacin is present most commonly in milk, eggs, cereals, and leafy vegetables. This requirement of niacin is 16 mg per day. And niacin, that is B3, vitamin B3 deficiency presents as pellagra. This pellagra, we can see pellagra in most common maize-based diets. There are few communities few regions of the world where the staple food is maize. In them we see pellagra most commonly, especially Southeast Asia. And B6 is pyridoxine. Pyridoxine, this is also helps in amino acid synthesis and neurotransmitter hemoglobin synthesis. Pyridoxine is present in yeast, sunflower seeds, wheat gram, unpolished rice, cereals, soybean. Normal daily requirement of pyridoxine is around 1 mg per day. This pyridoxine deficiency presents as peripheral neuropathy and can present as refractory seizures. Most of the refractory seizures, if child is present with refractory seizures, one of the things we have to remember is pyridoxine. We give 100 mg stat pyridoxine in the states. Generally, pyridoxine deficiency is usually not seen, but if someone is having malabsorption or especially with antitubercular drugs, isoniazid or something they're using, so they generally present as pyridoxine. So now with tubercular treatment, they've included pyridoxine supplementation. So mostly we don't see it so much now. And vitamin B12 and folate is mostly, these two are implicated in megaloblastic anemia. In detail, regarding vitamin B12 and folic acid, you read we'll come across in megaloblastic anemias. When you read about anemias, we'll read most of vitamin B12. One thing you have to remember regarding vitamin B12 is subacute. When it is deficient, it can lead to subacute combined degeneration of cord, where those posterior column and posterolateral columns are affected, and it can present with from peripheral neuropathy to spinal cord, and it can extend up to brain degeneration, like because of this impaired myelination. All these peripheral nerves, spinal cord nerves, and then neurons, and then brain also can be affected in vitamin B12 deficiency. That one thing we have to remember. And coming to specific diseases, like two important things in vitamin B complex are beriberi and pellagra. First, I want to deal with beriberi. Beriberi is because of vitamin B1 deficiency, that is thiamine deficiency. When the intake is less than 1 milligram per day, that can cause beriberi. I told you as beriberi is most commonly seen in people who are eating polished rice or alcoholics. We see beriberi. Beriberi again has three forms: dry beriberi, wet beriberi, and infantile beriberi. Dry beriberi, it is neurological thing. Actually, neurons are affected, so they present as peripheral neuritis with irritability and paralysis of lower limbs, loss of deep terminal zugs, and muscle wasting, and loss of position sensing. Here in dry beriberi, most commonly the dorsal column of spinal cord is affected. So whatever sensation, the position sensing, all the going through dorsal column, and anterior arm cells are affected, or spinal cord are affected, and then pyramidal tracts are affected. So there will be like paralysis of lower limb because of pyramidal tract affected. So as I told you, beriberi, the common symptoms are loss of reflex. Reflex is gone. There can be burning or tingling sensation because of peripheral neuropathy, and the numbness of feet can be there. Muscles can be tender. There will be foot drop, complete foot drop will be there, and there will be wrist drop also. Great weakness. The patient won't be able to walk. These are alcoholics, chronically malnourished. These people, so they'll be emaciated. They can have difficulty, like central nervous system features also, like confusion and inability to speak also can be there. And next comes to wet beriberi. Wet beriberi, they present with congestive heart failure and peripheral edema. All features of congestive heart failure, we know, like dyspnea, tachypnea, and then nausea, vomiting, upper pain abdomen. All these can be features of congestive heart failure. They can present with any of those features, and they will have peripheral edema, wet beriberi. And then infantile beriberi. The third type is infantile beriberi. It's more subtle onset in breastfed infants. If like after thiamine deficient mothers, if mother is having a thiamine deficiency, the mother's milk contains less of thiamine. So if the someone is exclusively breastfed, the mother is thiamine deficient, and the child will have thiamine deficiency. So they can have infantile beriberi. It is very subtle, like it's not very like won't present like dry beriberi or wet beriberi. It will have very subtle clinical features like cardiomegaly, sinuses, dyspnea, and aphonia, but they will have a gradual onset and subtle presentation. And then this thiamine deficiency can present as Wernicke encephalopathy also. Especially in children and infants, we can present Wernicke encephalopathy. We tell like there's a triad of Wernicke encephalopathy are mental confusion, ocular abnormalities, and ataxia. Ocular abnormalities are ophthalmoplegia and nystagmus can be there. In this all beriberi disease, if you see brain, they can have like postmortem. You can see they will have hemorrhagic lesions in thalamus and periventricular gray matter. See, this is beriberi. They will have difficulty in breathing, dyspnea, and like they can have sinuses also. If you see X-ray, they will have dilated heart, and pedal edema will be seen. And next, this right corner is Wernicke encephalopathy. Wernicke encephalopathy, triad of Wernicke encephalopathy, mental confusion, ocular abnormality, and ataxia. Next, coming to pellagra. Pellagra, we see niacin deficiency. Niacin deficiency, again, if you go over this, niacin deficiency, again, groups are predominant of maize consumption. They will have niacin deficiency. Niacin deficiency is like pellagra is characterized by 3 Ds. The patient will have dermatitis, diarrhea, and dementia. That is pellagra, 3 Ds. they'll have first coming to dermatitis, they have symmetrical rash in the body parts exposed to sunlight, especially in neck area. When it is whatever it is exposed to sun, that area will have a pigmented rash. And in acute and fulminant presentation, they can have pustules and other things also, and co-infections also can be there during the skin lesions. And coming to neurological symptoms, they'll have apathy, headache, and loss of memory. In chronic forms of pellagra, they can have posterolateral cord degeneration, and peripheral nerve lesions also can be seen in pellagra. This is Castle neck sign. Whatever I told you, like symmetrical pigmental rash in the body exposed to sunlight. This is Castle neck. This we see in pellagra. With this, we come to an end to our presentation. Vitamins. People have any doubts, can ask me. Any doubts, guys? Fine, I don't see any doubts. Then we'll end the session.